Can you please?
Councilmember Gama.
Here.
Councilmember Hernandez.
Here.
Councilmember McQueen-Lejean.
Here.
And Mayor Martinez.
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Perez will be joining us shortly.
Okay, we'll hear public comments.
Oh, I'm sorry. Councilmember McQueen-Lejean, did I see you?
Oh, no, yeah.
No, I'm sorry.
Do we have any public comments tonight?
No public comments.
Okay. Sure, Becky? Okay. We have a business item today, governance role training session 2. This is an information item, and I will now turn it over to our wonderful presenter, Mr. Jerry Preciado.
Thank you for the wonderful comment there. I appreciate that. Always nice to be described as wonderful presenter rather than tiresome, boring, or whatever else, right? So I'm sad because we had a chance for public comment this time, and I've never met Becky, so I was looking forward to a comment. That's okay. I'm Jerry Preciado, as was mentioned, and I've had the privilege of working with our Port Hueneme City Council for a couple of months now, and it has truly been a privilege. I have met all of you, and I have this tendency, period, to get attached to people that I'm working with or that I may be their coworkers or clients. But you know, to use my Texas drawl for a minute, it was easy to like all of y'all. That's the plural of y'all, all y'all, right? And it really has been. To a person, I've appreciated the time I've been able to spend with you. I didn't get back to all the correspondence that was sent to me, but I think overall those issues can be addressed today, or concerns if they want to be brought up, or we can talk afterward. I'm in no rush to leave. So if anybody has any questions afterward, please feel free to stick around and we'll make time and chat. I've got no pressing things for tomorrow. So just a quick little recap on what we did last time. I appreciated the opportunity to talk to you about, right, this purest form of democracy that we have, which is local government, and the importance of that governance role in setting a vision for our great city, right? One of your primary roles as the governance team, setting a vision, adopting policies and procedures in order for us to be able to carry out that vision and build a structure for all the employees of our good city to operate within and set behavioral expectations. And then we talked about a third role is championing that effort, championing those goals and objectives, the vision that's been set, which is a big part of it. We just got started, so you're right on time. And then the last part of it was, you know, the important part of hiring the right people, right? And hiring the right people to carry out and execute that vision by directing, delegating, building an accountability structure, right? And we have that with our new city manager, James Vega, who I had the pleasure of meeting today, right? So it was nice to see that all that being carried out. Did you have any questions or follow-up on those areas of setting a vision, adopting policies, championing the effort, and then hiring the executive to carry out your vision? Was there any carryover on that one? Are we good?
Okay. I'm good.
Okay. Excellent, excellent. So to build upon that and other elements of what we discussed, this session today is going to focus on 2 areas really, with one just little tiny one in the middle of the 2 bigger ones, and it's conflict resolution, self-awareness, which is part of that, and then communication. Now you're probably wondering, Jerry, we're professionals here. You've seen our resumes, and I have what's listed on the website anyway, and they're very impressive, from risk management to emergency response and management to you know, civilian employees in a military environment, academia, etc. There's a lot going on here. You don't need someone like me to come and talk to you about, right, some areas like conflict resolution and communication. But they're good reminders, no matter what level we're at, executive level, right, which is where we count you, management level, non-management, non-manager, supervisor, personnel, etc. These are good reminders for all of us to engage in. So I want to begin with this idea of the wedge. It's a metaphor, and this is going to sound a bit like hyperbole, But if you manage to, and this everybody in this room, has this opportunity by the time we're done, to have that wedge remover on your human interaction tool belts, it will improve every relationship in your life. I mean, every single one. These, of course, present company included, but also those that you have outside of here, back in your jobs, back in your community, neighborhood, back in your family, extended family, your sibling relationships, your marriage relationships, or just with your life partner. The wedge removal tool is a tool that will improve every relationship in your life, including the one with that neighbor who has those ornamental plums that hang over on your side of the fence. He doesn't want you to cut them when they fall onto your walk area, right? And we can't seem to get a solution for that. So the age-old example that we give, but it's real. And it's hard to find a happy medium when you want to be a good neighbor and not cut down the tree, even though you think it will not cause any harm. How do we get past those wedges that are the result of conflict? We're going to cover that today. And truly, I can tell you, we do this with clients large and small. We do the wedge with, 1,000 people in our auditorium at UC Santa Barbara, trying to think of locations nearby, and other places, because UC still is our biggest client, right? All 230,000 employees. And the information we get back, it's anecdotal in nature because it's email communication, texting at times, is that the wedge has had a positive impact on their relationships. It improved them. Now, I will share with you that I think I shared it with you last time, but it's closer now, August 5th. So it's coming up, and not this Saturday, but the one after. Sorry, August 6th. Don't want to forget that, especially because I'm being recorded. August 6th is my wedding anniversary. It'll be 35 years that I've been married to this incredible woman. And I will tell you, it wouldn't have lasted 35 days if I just didn't know and understand how to remove wedges. It's important for all of us in our relationship. So with that sort of, advanced, sounds like almost hyperbole, let's get started on this simple metaphor. Let's talk about your paradigm in you, right? Your lens to the world, right? I'm going to do it real simple. I'm going to use some visuals, and anybody who wants to participate can, but I'm going to start with you three, okay? Even our clerk's going to be involved here. I'm going to show you an image, and I want you to tell me the first thing that comes to mind. We're going to start with Georgiana, and we're going to go to Stephen, to Councilmember Gama, all right? Now, by the time it gets to you, Councilmember Gama, you need to not be influenced by these two. Keep your original thoughts, all right? Whatever came to mind when you see this image. Are you ready? All right, no pressure. Don't overthink it. Just tell us what you see, okay? Here it comes. What is that? I know it's a little washed out, but it's visible.
It looks like a spider to me.
A spider, okay? Next.
Now I want to say spider. I saw a horse.
A horse, very good.
Eiffel Tower.
Eiffel Tower. I don't get that answer a lot, Eiffel Tower, but I do get it. And it's probably my favorite answer because I like to travel. And that conjures up fun times, images, good bread, and cheese, right? So I like that one, Stephen, I really do. And so there it is, right? What it is. So this is one of the Rorschach ink blots, right? And the most common answer to this one is crabs. Now with the power of suggestion, do you see it? Them, I should say?
Yeah.
On either side, right? 10 o'clock and 2 o'clock. There they are, crabs, right there. That is the most common. You know what answer we get most popular lately? Since the pandemic? Respiratory system.
That's what I'm asking.
Is that what you saw? Yeah, it's some kind of thing.
The COVID germ.
Yeah.
Take it easy.
It's true. COVID influenced like crazy. So it's crabs. All right, let's go with, I'm gonna just break it up into now you two. And then I'm gonna go with you two, right? Becky, do you want to participate? We'll include you as well. All right, Becky, you think on the next one. You two, you ready? You're going first, Vice Mayor, and then the mayor. Don't feel pressured and don't be influenced. All right, here we go. What about this one? And by the way, no pressure, but this is the easiest one. Here we go.
I mean, like I said.
Misty,
The
what is it?
butterfly.
Butterfly?
I thought it was a butterfly too, but then I saw more like like this mystical horse with like big wings, so I see the wings and I see the like the front part of like the horse. What is it, a
Wow.
Pegasus?
There's a lot going on right there. A lot going on. If I were an FBI profiler, I'd wonder what's going on there.
Wait, you don't see it?
Right there.
So the most common answer on this one is moth or bats. Both of those are the most common answers, moth or bat. Have you see that? Yeah, moth or bat, right?
I see the.
I do get butterfly, Madam Vice Mayor, I do get butterfly. And not very often, because that's the ugliest butterfly I have ever seen, right? But people do see the butterfly.
It's all a matter of perspective.
Yes, and with that butterfly, I think to myself, if I'm ever feeling down in the dumps, maybe need a little energy boost or some positive energy, I'm gonna call Misty and invite her to lunch because she sees butterflies and ugly ink blots like this, right? So you'd be the person I'd want to lift my spirits. All right, last one. Any of you four who want to go, I'm gonna point to each one of you. Council member, here we go. You ready? This one's a little challenging. What is that?
I see internal organs.
Internal organs.
Yeah.
Very good, Martha.
Like a shield mask.
Shield mask. COVID again, mask, right? Mask, very good. Did you see anything there?
I see lungs.
Lungs?
The brain.
The brain. From like top view or? Interesting. Some kind of cerebral aerial view there with that one. The most common answer to this one is four-legged animals.
What?
Four-legged animals. Power suggestion, do you see them now?
No.
On this plot? All right, it's there, crawling up the side, head on top.
Yeah.
Maybe it looks like some crickets.
They look like raccoons or badgers to me.
It looks like.
I see a slice of the MRI with the contrast.
There you go. That could be well, somebody's MRI. So here's the $1 million question, right? Who saw this correctly?
Everyone.
Everybody did, right? And our good vice mayor said it earlier. It's a matter of perspective, right? Absolutely a matter of perspective. There's no wrong answer here. We see what we see, even if it's a crazy winged flying horse, right? We see what we see. And it's a great imagination. That was no attack intended there. Tremendous imagination.
We all know he has a good imagination.
Yeah, I'm just glad you didn't ask me what I saw in the other one.
Now I'm curious, right? So we all see things through a unique set of circumstances. The lens which we have developed as soon as we walked in that building, everything that happened between us coming through the doorway into these chairs and viewing it and hearing all my words, you're all hearing the same words, but are you getting the exact same message? Absolutely not, because you have different paradigms, a different lens to the world, right? And so when it comes to those lenses, how many are there? As of last fall, we hit a number we've never hit before, 8 billion paradigms. That is a lot of paradigms. For people who are concerned with things like population control, et cetera, that is an alarm for a lot of people. But the truth is, we are who we are. There are parts of the world that contribute to that greater than we do in the States. And there are other nations who are going in the reverse, like the nation of Japan is going in reverse on that. And in the US, the model is we're going to go up a little bit more and then we're supposed to come down, which is interesting, right? So we'll see what happens with that. And doesn't mean it's because that's the model now that it will remain such. But the point is 8 billion. Do we remember how much 8 billion is? Because now, as you local government leaders look at the national government leaders, and they talk in trillions now, right? We don't even pay attention to millions because anyone who owns a decent property in Southern California can feel like a millionaire, right? We don't pay attention as much to millions anymore, especially if you live in the Bay Area where I grew up. It's just different now, but billions, it's still a big number and we forget. But trillions, I can't begin to understand what trillions are. But let's just do the billions thing just to identify and make this point here. If I gave each of you $100,000 tomorrow morning and said the caveat is you must spend it You must spend it before the end of the day. So before midnight, you have to spend 100 grand. How many of you would take my challenge and take my 100 grand?
I think everyone would.
Yeah, I would think so. Could you do it? Could you spend 100 grand tomorrow?
Yeah, a nice vacation.
I think you could do it. Becky, you don't have enough faith in yourself. Yeah, you could definitely do it. I know I could, right? That's like almost a brand new truck. In today's prices. It's crazy, absolutely crazy how much things cost. Okay, if you engage in this exercise with me, I give you the 100 grand, and then the next day, on Thursday, I come back. And if you've spent your 100 grand, you're gonna get a fresh 100 grand. Still gonna keep playing with me? Georgia was like, yes, quit talking, start doling out here. We keep doing that, and we keep going. As long as you keep spending, we'll keep doling out that 100 grand a day. That's your per diem, 100 grand.
Yes.
You'll be spending $3 million a month, approximately. You'll be spending 36 million a year. Of course, you don't have to fritter it away, right? You can invest in property, vehicles, whatever you need to spend it on. At 36 million a year and 3 million a month, how long is it going to take you to get to $1 billion? Not 8 million, but at 1 billion.
30 years?
That is some pretty good math right there. That's not far off in the plus or minus category there. 27 plus years. Very good. 27 plus years. Spending 100 grand a day. You almost feel like a Kardashian, don't you, when you think about it? All that money. I just heard that Kim Kardashian's new company, or what's it called, Skims? Is that what her company is? Just got valued at several $1 billion. They just keep hitting, you know, gold mine after gold mine with the things that they're promoting, creating, and attaching themselves to. So it's going to take you 27 plus years to get to 1 billion. So that's a huge number, right? We can all agree 1 billion is a huge number. It is. Did you have a question?
One of the things that I teach my students is if we just consider seconds, 1 million seconds is 12 days, 1 billion seconds is 32 years.
Wow, that is a very, very good comparison. That illustrates the point beautifully right there. So there are 8 billion paradigms. The way you view the world, the assumptions, beliefs, values, right? What kinds of things are going to influence your paradigm? Your life experience, your number of years living for sure, your age, right? What other things impact your paradigm and influence how you see the world? What was that?
Your culture.
Culture, ethnicity, race, ancestry, come on in, national origin, etc. Those will lump all those together, Madam Council Member there. Definitely. That is absolutely going to influence the way you see the world. For example, those 35 years ago when I was initially married, right? My wife and I were kind of traditional. We met, we fell in love. Well, I fell in love, convinced her to fall in love. Took some months, really. And then we got engaged, and then we got married, and then we moved in together in that order, right? So can that make for a rough first year in a couplehood, if you will, when you never lived together before you got married? It can. Doesn't always mean it, but it was. Because I'm, you know, well, let's look at my wife. She's mostly Irish, but she's Swedish and Danish and Welsh, right? And English in her ancestry. And me, I'm Mexican on my mom's side and Mexican on my dad's side. Jalisco and Sinaloa, Mexico, right? So she grew up in San Jose, California, my wife. So her paradigm was familiar with you know, schoolmates, etc., who were Latino, but she never spent much time in their home to understand what many of the cultures are like. So when we got married, we moved into this little apartment up in the Bay Area, little town called Los Gatos, not Los Gatos. Los Gatos is like Paso Robles, right? So we were there, and one day I'm sitting there watching a ball game, and she says to me, Jerry, do you want to finish unloading this dishwasher, or do you want to go downstairs and move the stuff from the washers and the washroom to the dryers? What did my machismo paradigm say in response to that?
That's women's work.
I wasn't that literal about it, Miss Stevie. But pretty much I said, well, I'm going to pick door number 3. I made up my own answer, right? I'm going to finish watching my game. But when you're done with your work, can you bring me a sandwich?
Oh,
How well do you think that went over to an Irish, Swedish, Danish?
Good.
Not well at all, not well at all. She's like, what? What are you talking about? We had done a lot of due diligence. We were getting married for crying out loud, right? So we had to get to know each other, but we didn't understand the nuances of our cultural differences, like my paradigm on the division of domestic labor and my wife's paradigm on the same subject. I'd never given it much thought. Why? Because my primary caregivers influenced my paradigm or my lens to the world. My mother, my father, my two nanas, my grandmas, my mom's 4 sisters, her 2 brothers, and their 2 wives. All Mexican, all influencing the division of domestic labor was what our good Vice Mayor alluded to, which is anything within the 4 walls of our home was women's work and outside was men's work. Now, is that a universal paradigm? Does everybody believe that? Does anyone in this room believe that? Right. And so we had this paradigm collision happen, but that was a big part of my paradigm. And now I'll hold on to the rest of that story for later, right? As we bring back, can we shift our paradigms? Because I still wouldn't be married to that woman 35 years later had I not shifted my paradigm and had a more equitable division of domestic labor going on, right? So there's one. Thank you, Madam Council Member, for sharing that one about culture, ethnicity, ancestry, national origin. That can influence how we see the world. What other things have influenced your paradigm in your lives?
life experience. Like
Life experience. Like, what was your second part?
trauma.
Trauma. Can trauma influence how you see the world? Your level of trust, right? And experience that way? Yeah. Yeah, I see that. We've all seen it. And there are some people we know who went from trusting until somebody breached the trust, right? There's 2 categories, really. I still fall into that category. I will trust you until you do give me some reason not to trust you. You breach the trust someone, then I won't trust you anymore until you rebuild it or it gets rebuilt. Then there's the other part, which is I don't trust anyone until they earn my trust, right? And maybe we see people pivot from one to the other because of life trauma, being taken advantage of, right? Being on the receiving end of crime, violent or otherwise, right? And people can shift that paradigm. Definitely trauma and our life experience, how we were raised, who raised us. Was it a loving, caring, empathic human being, or was it an abusive, gaslighting mom or dad? Those things can have an impact on our paradigms for sure. What else? So ethnicity, culture, trauma in our lives. What other things have influenced your paradigms in life? Religion. That is a huge part of our paradigm, right? Whether we believe in organized religion or we're spiritual but don't believe in organized religion, whether we have a certain set of doctrine that we believe in or dogma, right? Has religion influenced the paradigms of certain regions of our planet, causing them to not experience peace for a long time? It's like a crossover, right? Not to get political at all, but sometimes the politics does veer into religion and they meet at a corner that ends up in chaos. And we can go hundreds and hundreds, dare we say thousands of years because of it, all within the influence of our paradigms with it. But religion is a big part. And one of the things that helps, for example, in my situation, and a lot of my examples, as you know, are personal, in that early part of the relationship where we were just sort of figuring each other out, was the common faith that we had. That was a big part of it. Helped us overcome some other deficiencies. Give me 1 or 2 more other things, and then I'm going to move on. What other things influence our paradigm? Education. Thank you, Councilmember Hernandez. I really appreciate that one because that really is a pivot point for many of us, right? For what they call first gens, right? The first person in our family to go to college, for example. That is a pivot point for so many of us to shift the paradigm from, what seemed like a predestined outcome to a world of opportunities, it feels like, and it's far different. Education has a huge impact, and not just on first gens. It can have a huge impact on people who are 4th generation college students as well. What they study, how they study, and how well they do finding their calling, for example, in education, right? Because of what they studied, etc. Amazing things happen. One more, and then I'm going to press forward. What other things influence our paradigm?
Relationships.
Relationships absolutely do. They absolutely do. For example, how many of you, this is not rhetorical, I really do want to know the answer to this question. How many of you are an only child? You don't have any siblings? No one in this room. How many of you are the baby in your family? I know at least one other, right? Yeah. Right, and when we were speaking earlier, I'm the baby of 2, right? Some people are the baby of 7. I think there's a far different relationship going on there, right? In our dynamic when it comes to relationships. How many of you are the oldest child? There you go. There's no surprise you're in this room then. Oldest children tend to have the stereotype, not always, right? But the stereotypical perception of being the responsible one. You know, our oldest daughter, she's the oldest of 5. We went girl, girl, boy, boy, and then princess at the very end there of our 5 children. That influenced her paradigm quite a bit. And our oldest daughter, when she went off to college, back in the day, 2009, I think, 2007, it was like a vacation for her. Didn't have to drive anyone anywhere. Didn't have to, you know, pick people up in places. Didn't have to, et cetera, you know, be the supervisor of the children's chores. So all these things influence our paradigms and other things, like our success at work, our failures at work, our success in relationships, our failures in relationships, all influence our paradigm. Where we come from, where our people come from, right? I'm from the States. San Diego is my hometown. That's where I was born. The USA is my nation of origin. That's where I pledge my patriotism. But then my ancestry, those people from Sinaloa and Mexico, and Sinaloa and Jalisco, Mexico, they have my absolute love and support. That cultural upbringing, right, that I had in the States with those influences are inextricably intertwined with my patriotism. And so there they are. And we become who we become. And then we give context to the world. Everything I've said then for the last 28 minutes, we're almost a half hour into our time together. You process through that unique paradigm of yours. All the words were the same that I shared, but you process them very differently because they had to go through your unique lens, which gives structure to your world, which is why when it comes to professional educators, you got to figure out what paradigms are on the other end, and you keep adjusting accordingly, right, to try and reach the one who needs to be reached, right, so that we get there, we don't leave anyone behind. No one's left behind in those situations. So has anyone anointed any of us in this room king or queen of the paradigm universe?
No, I'm just kidding.
Thank you for raising your hand a little bit, though. It feels at times like we do feel like sometimes in certain rooms, like, you know, we do have all the right wisdom, knowledge, experience, taste, etc. But overall, 8 billion paradigms, it would be arrogant, extremely arrogant for any of us to sit here thinking, wow, everybody else is so lucky to be in this room with me because I have the right paradigm, right? Such a person does not exist, right? And let's give context to that. Well, Bobby Martinez, he is the mayor of the city council. Surely he is king of the paradigm universe. Is that true? Absolutely not. It just means he has a paradigm that also has authoritative context and responsibility with it. But it doesn't make whatever he says universally true. Imagine if I were king of the paradigm universe. If I were the king and I laughed at something, you would all have to laugh. Because if I think it's funny, everybody has to think it's funny. If I think it's offensive, everybody has to think it's offensive. That's not who any of us are. Such a person doesn't exist. Again, we see people who act like that. They act like everything they observe, they acknowledge, they say, they put forward, etc., like they are king of the paradigm universe. Well, none of us will intellectually raise our hands and say, yes, I'm king of the paradigm universe, right? Or queen of the paradigm universe. When it sneaks up on us, here's what it looks like. You say to one of your colleagues, don't you think you're making too much of this? Don't you think you're overreacting to the situation? You're wrong. That's not what they meant. You are being too sensitive. Get thicker skin. Those top 4 are paradigm projecting behaviors, right? When I said to one of my kids, right, hey, what do you care what other people think? I don't care, and it's about time you quit caring too. Was I acting like king of the paradigm universe? Yes. Now, could I respect that that's a great concept, that your life is going to feel far more peaceful and your self-esteem will go up when you care less what certain people's opinions are of you? Yeah, I think that's a real principle that can be taught, but not at the expense of that child's feelings in that moment. It's just not something that I should ever be doing. That is essentially, to use that, less than formal term, that's a child coming to me and saying to me, and I say, hey, why are you so unhappy? What's going on? Well, so-and-so said that I was a da-da-da-da-da. Well, what do you care what they think, right? You should just care what you think about you and your friends think of you. So you can pick and choose who cares about you and what you think. What I just did there is crap all over their feelings. That's the informal term, right? I disregarded, dismissed, spat upon them and those feelings. Are they entitled to those reactions? Yeah, 8 billion of us, all entitled to feel what we feel, experience what we experience. And when they don't agree with us or we don't agree with them, it is not our privilege and right to say to them, hey, you're doing this wrong. You have the wrong paradigm. If they react a certain way, case in point, look at our country in 2020. The Black Lives Matter movement really got a lot of traction, right, in 2020 because of the George Floyd incident in Minneapolis. And there are people who were watching this unfold and this emphasis on Black Lives Matter, and their paradigm was so focused on how they were taking that, there was no room for any instruction or enlightenment. They were rigid, inflexible paradigms. They're like, what? Black Lives Matter? No, all lives matter. Well, the message was really not that it didn't say just Black Lives Matter. It said Black Lives Matter. And it was in response to the fact that, looking at it statistically, and I have trained, and I absolutely love sworn personnel and law enforcement. I do. I'm a big fan of that particular field, location, et cetera. Not just them, all public safety, fire as well. And I've trained more of them than anyone else in my career over the last 26 years. And so I have a great affinity for the line of work and the sacrifices made by those individuals. And so when somebody says, hey, Black Lives Matter, it was in response to, hey, people who are of African descent do not, statistically speaking, receive the same level of treatment, approach, service, respect, etc., when engaging in law enforcement with law enforcement personnel, right, with sworn personnel. That was the message. And the message that, hey, Black Lives Matter too, not just non-Black lives who get better treatment when approached, when met, et cetera, et cetera. Now, I'm not speaking universally for all sworn personnel, right? Said looking at one particular council member. I'm not speaking for all sworn personnel. Like I said, huge fan and a believer in funding police, big believer. But statistics will show with all those people that I have encountered in the cities that I've worked with, go back to my lawyer days, some of the things that we encountered investigating situations were indefensible. There was no way that we could justify the actions that were taken by certain personnel in those situations. And so if there was a pattern of behavior like that, and we saw that there was, either with certain agencies, certain regions of the country, et cetera, then we realized, okay, people are being treated differently based on the color of their skin. In Arizona, it might be somebody perceived to be an illegal immigrant from Mexico or somewhere south of that border. In the South, it could be Black. In the North, it could be Black, et cetera. So when we say Black Lives Matter, it was not just Black Lives Matter, but Black Lives Matter too. If we're going to be accurate about that, we should put a TOO at the end of that slide. Black Lives Matter too. Now, some people, this goes back to our paradigm, right? Some people saw that, well, Black Lives Matter, all lives matter. How dare you? I'm white, my life should matter too. We're not saying it doesn't with the movement, right? We're saying this thing. Now, a lot of other things have happened with leadership within that movement, et cetera, that have caused a lot of suspicion and people to feel justified and how they reacted to it all. But it illustrates the point beautifully. Our paradigms are going to dictate how we feel about any given situation. And look at the great bailout back in the Great Recession that happened between, say, 2008 and 2011-12 during the first Obama administration. And there was this idea of, too big to fail kind of thing. And when people were being bailed out, right, who had been in arrears in their mortgages, et cetera, if you in this room, your paradigm was, oh, hey, I took on a mortgage, and with that responsibility, I skimped and I saved to make sure that I made my mortgage payments on time or close to it on a monthly basis for years. I took a second job, right? I was working at the port during the day and I was working over at McDonald's in the evenings to make sure that I met my obligations. And now you're bailing these people out, right? Your paradigm's going to have a problem with that. You know, for some of you, for others of you, even if you did scrimp and save, your paradigm with a greater empathy in it might be saying, oh, good for them. Good for them. I know what it's like to suffer in those situations. It just depends. Some people, like my kids, right, who were watching this whole debate recently, it's still going, still unfolding, on forgiveness of student loans, right? My wife and I had a commitment that we would get each of our kids through undergraduate. We would make sure they didn't have to take out loans for that, but graduate school, they were on their own. So some of our kids have obligations, and they're like, yes, come on. Right? They didn't care about party affiliation or anything else. They just wanted to see debt forgiveness, right? And so that's how they view it. And I view it a little differently than my own children view it, right? In that context. So these paradigms, everyone's entitled to how they feel and how they react. It would be wrong for me to say to you, hey, don't you think you're overreacting, right? And just dismissing your feelings out of hand because you have a paradigm that's every bit as eligible for respect as mine. 8 billion of us have those paradigms. And so the last two are what we call conversation stoppers, right? Let's use our counsel as an example. If somebody says, hey, we've got this situation, we have this shortfall, we need to decide what to do with it. And then one of you says, there's only one right way to do this. How many times is that a true statement, truly?
Balancing your checkbook.
What's that?
When you balance your checkbook.
When you balance your checkbook, right? But even then, I assure you that if the deficit isn't too great for some people, they would be okay with that, right? You might get down to the number, right, in the penny, but it just depends on your perspective with it. You know, if I still have checks, then I'm going to write that regardless of the balance, right? That's it.
You lost me.
And no, I agree with you wholeheartedly, Councilmember Gum. I agree with you. I am more of a fiscal conservative. I don't believe in having future generations pay my debts and obligations. I don't. But there's a different perspective on that. Who's right? It's just like the ink blots all over again, isn't it? Who's right? It depends on what you think is important, what you think matters, and what you think is going to achieve the outcome that should be achieved. And again, all of it based on discretion, judgments, right? Perception, all of it. And so when one of you says there's only one right way to do that, it's like saying to your Max, right? Siri, hey Siri, get me from here to Oxnard City Hall. She's going to tell you the best way to get there, right? The most efficient way right now, if that's where you're going, based on the traffic patterns, etc. But how many ways are there to get from this location, this marvelous community center, to Oxnard City Hall? How many ways are there? There are a lot of ways to get there. There are a lot of ways, you know, but there is one most efficient way. And if that's the question, then we have a single answer. But if the question is how many ways, right? So there's only one right way to do that. So rarely a true statement, right? The statement maybe is trying to say, hey, the way I look at the situation, I believe the best way to do that is, and that's okay. That is absolutely okay. But it can't be the only right way to do it, unless we're running a wastewater treatment plant and we're regulated by federal regulations and things like that. If we're in finance for the city of Port Hueneme and we have to follow not only generally accepted, you know, practices, et cetera, those GAAP rules, but we also have to follow local area, blah, 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 right, et cetera. Then there's things that we have to comply with. Look at the last one. Everyone knows that the best, really, everyone knows that the best pho you're going to find is at Pho Saigon, just around the corner over here, right, in Port Hueneme. Right, that's the best you're going to find anywhere in Port Hueneme. Is that very objective statements? No, it's subjective, right? I say that because I just ate that and I found it delicious. Want to go on record as that, right? So there's only one right way. Here's the challenge. Have you met somebody who has a non-confrontational paradigm? Might you have a non-confrontational paradigm? Yes. We can all know somebody, or we might have one on different contexts, etc. But non-confrontational paradigms are so common that I would say half the time when we get called to be professional wedge removers, when we're not doing training, we're actually identifying what the behaviors are that are driving the wedges. And we're trying to eliminate those behaviors with our clients so that they don't continue to have the conflict and the wedges and the dysfunction that leads to, right? And so one of the most common things we run into is leaders with non-confrontational paradigms who are not willing, able, or want to have critical conversations. Some might call them crucial conversations, right? And so what happens? The stuff just keeps happening. Nothing happens. That's right. And so there's only one right way to do that. And let's say half of our council have non-confrontational paradigms. Have we had a chilling effect on further debate when we say things like that? If you say, hey, there's only one right way to do this, then those people with non-confrontational paradigms are going to be like, okay, if I say what I was going to say now, it's going to be the opposite. I don't agree with it. So I guess I'm not going to say anything because they don't want to be confrontational. It has an absolute chilling effect on dialogue, on discussion, if we have that world that we live in. And some people are like, well, it's not my fault. If other people don't come prepared and ready to fight their corner, because I had somebody say that to me, a professor, say that to me, and for a faculty meeting where he's having a chilling effect, it's about 27 members of the faculty, half of them are junior faculty, non-tenured. And so, of course, they're not going to talk to a full professor and resist them, because they disagree with them. So it's an absolute chilling effect in that situation. And so the challenge lies within this. Are we here to discharge our duties and responsibilities? Remember, in the best interest of the public. And if we are, then we shouldn't be projecting our paradigm as if it's universal truth, right? Because it has a chilling effect in those situations. So you may not be king or queen of the paradigm universe, but sometimes it sneaks up on us. And we act like it when we engage in that way. What happens? Here's the byproduct. In a minute, I'm going to stop talking and have you do something for me. But here's the effect of paradigms colliding. A wedge is driven into the relationship. Okay, so these paradigms collide. And if it's bad conflicts, the byproduct are wedges, right? Think of your romantic relationships in your life. When your paradigm collides with your significant other, and it's not healthy conflicts, it's not, hey, let's agree to disagree, right? And move on. It's, no, you're wrong. No, you're wrong, right? Boom. A wedge is the byproduct of bad conflicts. Now, wedges driven into relationships will destroy a relationship. We've seen them destroy public works departments. We've seen them destroy police departments. No department, right, is in any way excluded from this statement that we're making. We've worked with all of them, not just in California, but across the country as we do this. And so wedges will destroy a romantic relationship. Wedges, if allowed to exist, will destroy your relationship with your children, with your siblings, right? It will destroy any relationship. And it's all the result of your paradigm colliding and somebody not recognizing what's happening, or both not recognizing. Wedges can be removed, and that's what we're about to talk about. And they're real destroyers, but they can be fixed. Now, let's back up for a minute and say, can we all agree that conflict will always happen? That should be the bumper sticker, not crap happens, right? I cleaned that up a little bit, but wedges happen. Conflict will always happen, But some conflict is good. Like you discussing things up on the dais, right? In your role as a governance team. And you saying, hey, we need to be mindful of the impact us spending this money is going to have on our ability to even consider future decisions in this area because of X, Y, or Z, right? As we project out, as our staff has done such a good job, our budget then is just going like this. And by here, we have no more decisions. So if this doesn't work, that's a good thing to say. It's a good thing to alert the rest of the team too, if you haven't already considered that, right? And then somebody else shares, and we go back and forth. That kind of debate is good conflict because it leads to well-informed decisions. But when we choose to project our paradigms as if because I believe this and you're not agreeing with me, you don't understand it. That is the challenge. Therein lies the biggest challenge. When we project our paradigm as if it's universal truth, when in fact it's just a well-reasoned opinion on our part, and we can't understand why other people don't agree with us, right? Therein lies one of the great challenges with paradigms, because we feel so well placed in our intent, which is the best thing for the city. We still feel so well placed in our motivation, which is to achieve an outcome that's palatable and good for all of us. We feel so well positioned, yet it's not going that way. It's problematic, right? It's because of these paradigms. So when the conflict happens and it advances methodology, it advances know-how, it advances our understanding, that's great conflict, right? So good that those last 50 years of the 20th century, 1950 to 2000, the advances in medicine were so great that the actuaries who study, a number of factors in our lives, and the life and benefits actuary, life and casualty actuaries, they said in the year 2000, people born in the year 2000 are going to live to be 120 years old. What was the major assumption in that statement? If we have the same quality and percentage of advancements in medicine that we had from 1950 to 2000, from 2000 to 2050, people born in the year 2000 are going to live to be 120. So that remains to be seen. We're almost halfway through that number, right? And we have made some great advances. I don't know if you've been watching the news on those things. So what does it all come down to? These paradigms, right? And how do we get to some of the conflict that's most challenging? Let's illustrate a little bit more. When you're working shoulder to shoulder as a governance team, that's great. When these wedges push you apart, right? What happens? We lose control of our hypersensitive radar. What is that hypersensitive radar? We needed a visual, so there it is, right? There's your hypersensitive radar popping out of your head. When does it come out normally? Normally, it just comes out when somebody touches on a subject that's near and dear to your heart, right? Like somebody just chimes in and is like, well, we have the worst education system in the world, right? All of a sudden, boom, our good mayor, as a professional educator, his radar can go, what are you talking about? We have an excellent system. Not everybody executes it the right way or the same way, but it's an excellent system, right? So his radar came out. For me, it was anytime when my kids were younger, even still, if you were to say something about my children, boom, right? Come on. What did you just say about my son? Right? What did you just say about his basketball skills? I know he sucks, but that's for me to say, not you. Right? And that radar just comes out. It does. And I'm so protective when they were little. So we all have, here's the challenge. When you go like first wedge, right? That's not going to destroy you. If you're going to get wedges, right? Workplace relationships, romantic relationships, you can get a wedge a day, right? As long as you address them, you're fine, right? It's totally fine. One day my wife came home with chunky peanut butter. What's that about, right? What is that about? And so I'm like, hey, I like it. Jif, Skippy, doesn't matter the brand, but it's got to be creamy and smooth, right? She's like, oh no, we've had that for years now. Let's try this one. And of course, my rigid paradigm was very much not having it. Made a sandwich, ate it in front of her. This is awful. There's a wedge. You can survive that wedge. You can absolutely survive that wedge. It's just one little wedge. But then, if you leave it unattended, a second wedge. Talking about, whether or not we should refinance our house. Big wedge right there, right? And then what about this one? And that one. Then next thing you know, disconnect. And we lose control of the hypersensitive radar. So if we had too many little wedges happen amongst the governance team, then we get to this point and we lose control of the hypersensitive radar. Next thing you know, as soon as you walk in, my radar pops out. As soon as you walk in, maybe my wedge is with Martha. I can't picture having a wedge with Martha, but there it is, right? We have this disconnect. And so I'm over here talking to the four of you. We're waiting for her to arrive. Hey, Stephen, how's it going? Misty, what's going on? No, Bobby. And then all of a sudden, when I start telling you the story, I'm in the middle of it, and Martha walks in. All right, I guess we can get started then, right? And there it is. It has almost a physical manifestation, right, on us. And so it's challenging because then what happens? Everything that Martha says, I'm going to make negative assumptions and view it in the worst possible light. If she gives the greatest suggestion on an agenda item, right? Here it is. And everyone's like, oh my gosh, that's a great idea. Everyone's leaning forward to see her. Wow, that was so smart. Well done, right? Kind of thing. And I'm like, what a kiss up. What a glory hound. Right? I would have said that too, you know. I'm not going to give her any benefit because I've lost control of this because of that disconnect. A little bit snuck up on us. Right? She's doing fine, but too many times, right? This happened and this wedges happened.
Martha, you gotta chill it out over there.
This is a real thing, right? Real challenges like this happen. It can happen on a governance team. It can happen in a romantic relationship. It can happen with siblings. I meet people all the time, haven't spoken to their siblings in a decade, 2 decades. And when I have this little sickness and I'm meeting somebody and say, James and I went to lunch for the first time. Yeah, I haven't talked to my sister in like 15 years. Boom, inside I'm almost leaping for joy because I want to reverse engineer this. So what happened there? You know? And then I want to figure out, was it a bunch of little wedges that happened? Or was it one major wedge where, you know, she told the parents on him when he you know, and found that weed in his drawer, you know, kind of thing, right? I don't know, seemed to fit James. So, right, I want to reverse engineer that because it's always going to be wedges. It's always going to be wedges, right? In this metaphor, the wedge, a simple metaphor for me, every relationship in your life. People who are excellent wedge removers are excellent human interactors, right? And I promise you, in just a little bit, you will have that tool in your tool belt, and you'll be able to remove wedges if you want to. And if the other person wants to also, you can't remove wedges from one side. It's just not possible, right? We've tried in many ways to figure that one out, and it just doesn't work. We've been doing this wedge thing now for a little over about 17 years, and we've just never been able to find a way where one side can remove that wedge. So what happens then after this is, you know, we get to the terrible D words that happen, right? Dysfunction, disharmony, dissension, discord. You know, departure is a terrible one, despair is a terrible one, but all the terrible D words are the results, right, of too many wedges driving us apart in that situation. So, right, departure. You have a really good employee working for the city of Port Hueneme who says, you know what, because there's maybe, you know, too many wedges and what we call toxicity, right, in the police department. And that employee is like a good employee. We don't want to lose him or her. And they're like, you know what, I can go do my work elsewhere. I can take my line, my skills and abilities to Oxnard, to Camarillo, right? And they leave. Not because they want to, but because it's just too toxic here. That is a terrible byproduct of wedges. It really is. Despair, defined as the loss of hope. And what happens when you lose hope? You don't want to get up in the morning, right? It's followed by depression and other such feelings. And so wedges are horrible. They're horrible. And so here's the question I have for you. What is the #1 obstacle to removing wedges? Now, I want you to take a minute, since I've been going on and on, talk to your neighbor. A couple people over here can talk to each other too, then you two, and I'll talk to Georgiana, right? What do you think are the reasons why we don't remove wedges, right? That's the question. Why don't we remove these wedges? They're not good for us. They don't help us, so why don't we remove them? Got the assignment? Ready, go.
I don't like nothing. Maybe I didn't understand. So we get along.
Although my boss.
Yes, absolutely.
So I go to one of the hours before it gets there.
That was like my English.
Because this is what happened.
The reason why people that don't really build it. I guess like a lot of those like frustrated. There's like a lot of father.
I'm good. I see that. Yeah.
Usually you know.
Like I also. Since I saw the famous. I learned so much. Well, I guess that question is why, but you can't do the guidance on this. Like get rid of one person.
All right, just in the interest of time, we're coming back.
That's all.
I know you've had at least one, right? So let's play Family Feud. Top 5 answers on the board. Right, what are the answers? Right? What do you think? Who wants to volunteer? What are some of the reasons we don't remove wedges?
Ego.
Ego, right? What's another word for ego?
Not your own ego.
So. So.
Yeah, you guys got it right up.
Pride.
Personal pride, right? We don't think we have a wedge. We don't have a problem here. You're just not seeing this the right way. Right? If you drop your paradigm, put on my spare paradigm, then you'll see it what I like to call the right way. It's amazing to me how quick people figure that out. That personal pride. The challenge with personal pride also is as I go through the steps to remove a wedge in a minute. Those chairs are hard. I do intend to give you a break in a minute to get up and move around and off those chairs. It is hard for us to take the very important step to remove a wedge, which are these key words. Are you ready? I'm sorry. That's like a jagged little pill for so many people to swallow, right? I am sorry. It's so tough. And yet that's an important part of removing wedges. It's just 4 little steps to remove wedges, right? And it can alter the trajectory of a relationship. Workplace, romantic, sibling, all of those. What other reasons, though, don't we remove wedges? Besides those that we heard. Anyway. Fear, right? We make an effort. I go to my colleague, right, et cetera, and I'm like, hey, can we sit down and talk, about this wedge? What are you talking about? I don't have time to hold hands and sing Kumbaya with you, light a candle and do whatever. I don't have time for that, right? You just handle your business, I'll handle mine. And it gets worse afterward. Fear of retribution, retaliation, right? Things like that. Fear. That is a huge reason. If pride is number 1, I would say fear is number 2 on our Family Feud game. So we're doing well. You have it on the tip of your tongue. What is it?
Anger and frustration.
Oh, you had 2 on the tip of your tongue. Anger and frustration. Oh my gosh, definitely. When you are mad, is your vision often impaired? Can you see straight when you are mad? Depends on the level of anger, right? But for the most part, you're not always seeing it in the best light or the most productive light, right? And it impairs our judgment. What did you have? Did you guys come up with one that we had covered? Why don't we remove wedges? Stubbornness. I like the word in Spanish better. Stubborn. Terco. It's just terco. It can almost be a nickname right on the back of my jersey, right? Terco, stubborn. That is a tremendous reason why so many wedges don't get removed. We become this immovable force that feels like, hey, if we give on this, that is a sign of weakness, right? And it doesn't happen. And I say to you, what is the cost of that? What is the cost of this thing where we need to be right about things? It is an immense cost. It really is. So we wrote it on a post-it. Dear humankind, if you want a happy and harmonious relationship, you're going to have to give up your insistence on being right. Sincerely,
Not if you ask my husband.
Absolutely 100% accurate. Now, is there right or wrong? I'm not a person who believes in worlds of bunch of shades of gray. I do believe there is right or wrong. I don't want you to mistake my message for that. There is right and wrong. But how many decisions do we make that are moral compass driven in our paradigms? Not many. Not many. if we're talking about, embezzling money and violating, particular government codes in the state of California, me and my fellow finance employees in the city of Port Hueneme, there's a moral compass decision right there. Whether or not we commit, right, some violation of the law that would cause us imprisonment, a fine, or both, right, under various sections of our government code and our penal code that go with that hand in hand. So there are some moral decisions that happen. And for some of you in this role, I'm looking at my 5 council members. For some of you, much of what you're doing has a moral imperative, but that could just be your paradigm influencing it that way. So be mindful of that. Do some introspective analysis on that as to whether or not we paint the swing sets red or blue and the new park that's being developed, or we order them in a particular color, is a moral imperative or not. Because I have met council members that believe that it is. Because red was the color of courage and yellow is the color of cowardice, right? And so it would, is that a personal paradigm projection? Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And it became a sticking point, right, with that particular group. Not on a huge subject, but enough where, they wanted unanimity here because it was, this is a great thing, building a new incredible park in the city, right, that they were doing. So being right versus being happy. When that last thought on here, then I'm going to give you a little time off. When I was in my 20s and early 30s, being right was like my manna from heaven. I felt the need to be right. And I started law school at the age of 27, which was the average age of our class coming in. Some were younger, some were older. And it was like the beehive for people who needed to be right. I went to UCLA Law School. It was a great experience, great classmates, great faculty, etc. But you realized everybody wanted to be right. And we could slam the table and prove we were right, in any given situation, even if we didn't believe it, right? It was like the nest for all these people. And it carried over into my personal life. And I'd go have a hot dog with my buddy, Stephen over at the port where we work. And, he'd say something and I'd like, well, I'm going to take the opposite view here. Just to have this sort of give and take, right? This debate, if you will, because I like to debate. And he'd say X and I'd say, no, it's Y. He'd say, why do you say it's Y? And I'd give him a very good answer, right? Because that's what I did. He'd say, it's X and here's Y. and so forth. And we go back and forth. And by the time we were done, somebody else had joined him on his side, right? And it's just me. And then somebody else joined us, 3 of them and me. And at the end of it, I'm like, okay, I agree with you guys, right? I agree with you. I was just messing with you. I don't believe Y. I believe X. But we're good, right? Let's get another hot dog. And they're all fuming and mad and everything. Hot dog, I don't even want to look at you right now. But I was not emotionally attached to it. I just wanted to see if I could be right on something right there. And it was a ridiculous game that I continued until some person gave me this critical feedback. And they looked me in the eye and said, you know what? It was after one of these debates at a gathering we were at. And I was like, hey, let's go try some more of that. Da-da-da. I'm not going to try anything with you. You know what? You're on. And it went something like A, some other letters, and then whole, right? And they looked me in the eye. And this is a person I respected. And they called me an a-hole, right, in that situation. And it was at a time in my life, about 33, 34, where I started to realize that maybe there was more to this external perception of me that wasn't aligned with my perception of how I was viewed externally. And that's what it was, right? And it was the beginning of my awakening. It was my epiphany, right? Given to me dead on. All right, sorry.
Yeah, it's funny, you're an attorney and spent a lot of time around attorneys. And one of the things that I find fascinating is handling a case and you go to trial and the case being an accident that I was there on day one and I through the whole recovery and all the way through, and then we find ourselves in trial and I'm sitting there listening to the other side, the attorney, I'm like, and I know the facts, like, man, that sounds pretty good. He's almost turning me. And so it's amazing how two sides can make arguments that sound so good, and then you have to decide one or the other.
Yeah.
And I think that's real fascinating when you get into decision making. It's like, okay, how are we going to make a decision factually and then go out to lunch with the opposing.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah. And it's getting harder and harder all the time because everybody wants to turn any disagreements into an adversarial relationship. We talked about that last time. And it doesn't have to be that way. It's tough because our national and international leaders are giving us that example. If you don't agree with me, you are my enemy, right? And I see that with what we call, the aisle in Washington. It used to be you could be on the other side of the aisle and be best friends. Ted Kennedy and Orrin Hatch could not find two more opposite people. And they were the best of friends outside of the chambers, right? They were pals. You couldn't do that today, not in 2023. You will get that new verb that we took from a noun. You will get primaried, right? And you will not even be able to stand in a general election because they will knock you out in primary because you're consorting with the enemy, if you will. Very challenging. So it's a tough world we live in, it is. But we don't have to be the wedge creators. When we come back, we'll talk about, right, this question, then give you the solution for how to remove wedges and pivot over into communication and self-awareness. I have 4:07 on my watch. So let's take 5 minutes enough?
Yeah.
Let's take 5 minutes and then we'll come back and pick it up where we left.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, do you all know our Cal JPIA staff member who's here today?
No.
I'll take a moment to, Tony, would you introduce yourself to the group if you don't mind for a
I
moment?
know, Tony.
Hi, everyone. I'm Tony Pizzolo. I'm the Senior Risk Manager at the California JPIA that works with the staff here this week.
Hello.
Nice to meet you.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for making the long drive.
Yeah.
Mine wasn't long. I think I stayed in Moore Park last night, so not far. Appreciate the journey, the supports, right, all of it from Cal JPI. I said it before, and I'll say it's just a pool that just has so much expertise in so many areas of local government, right? And I don't have to tell Stephen because he's on the board and he sees the staff over there and how capable they are and all that they have done and will do, you know, with regard to supporting you and the things that you need. So, you know, if something is ever needed, by all means, contact James and say, I'm wondering about this, you know, especially as a collective, if you're looking to add things to an agenda, you know, James, I know that the JPIA has X, Y, and Z. I wonder if they might give us something. That'd be a good place to start. And if they don't, they'll find someone. They found me. That was meant to get a laugh. Thank you for a little. Anyway, thank you, Tony, for being here. We appreciate that very much. All right, so continuing on, right? We've answered these questions through our little discussion, our wedge rib, but I want to see a show of hands. How many of you have experienced what I'm calling a wedge in your, not just work or this government thing, but life in general? How many of you have experienced a wedge? By show of hands. Everybody but James and Georgiana. Right? I was gonna say, if you're not raising your hand, you're probably the wedge creator. That's how it works.
Oh, too bad.
So wedges are real and they destroy things, right? So we answered this question earlier. We know they don't improve relationship. Now, some people say, well, wait a minute, if they force you to address the wedge, yeah, wedge removal improves relationships, but right, not the wedge itself. It creates things that go the opposite. When my wife and I have a wedge early in our relationship, what would happen? Silent treatment. Right? The exact opposite of what was needed to remove a wedge, which is communication, right? And so silent treatment, that's never going to be. Why do you bother to continue? We played that game and you got it right off. Ego, personal pride, fear, right? Others would include, we don't know how. We don't have that tool on our tool belt. Others might include the absolute fear of everything associated with it. And still others include, I just don't have time, Jerry. I'm a busy city engineer. I don't have time to address all these wedges, etc. Right? A lot of reasons we don't remove them. And so we just allow them to continue. They're very challenging. So here we go. Here's the wedge removal process. And again, this slide deck is downloaded onto that computer. This computer.
That is the city computer.
Just city computer? Good. So then you have it. And if you for whatever reason it deletes itself, I'll email it to you again. And there's a handout we could give you also with some of the stuff we're talking about today. So first required paradigm recognition. You all have a paradigm and it's influencing who you are. I love J.K. Rowling, right? If you have adult children, you need to remember the statement right here, right? There's an expiration date on blaming your parents for your current condition. If you have small children, I hope you will embrace this into your parenting philosophy, because I believe we should be teaching this to our offspring, right? To our legacy. Right now I have 4 grandkids, 8, 6, 3, and not quite a year. And I believe that I will be influencing them with this bit of information as they start to get a little older. Certainly the 8 and 6-year-old, we already talked about accountability, personal accountability. And the truth is, this is one of the characteristics of the happiest people I know. They don't deflect. They own it. They lean into it. Mistakes or anything else that happened, right? There's an expiration date on blaming your parent for your current condition. What would that look like? My wife is upset with me because I'm not willing to unload the dishwasher, go down to the laundry room and fix that situation, whatever it is. And in fact, I look her in the eye and deflect. And I say, honey, you're not really mad at me. you're mad at my mother for how she raised me. So quit yelling at me and call her and yell at her, right? Would I still be married if I'd done that? Thank you, Becky, for the laugh on that one, right? No, I wouldn't, right? I had to own it eventually, and I did. She made it very clear to me. You know, she's a very no-nonsense woman. And she married her opposite. I'm nothing but nonsense. So she says to me, if you think we're gonna get home from work, I'm gonna run around with like a chicken with my head cut off with all these kids, because we had decided we wanted 5 kids. We knew that. We wanted a big family. She grew up with 1 brother. I grew up with 1 brother. We wanted a larger family. So 5 seemed to be a good number. I'm going to be running around like a chicken with my head cut off, and you're going to kick your heels up and watch your game. You're crazy. That is never going to happen. We will not be having any children if you think that's how the division of labor is going to go. And in my head, in my paradigm, I thought, oh my gosh, this is so wrong. I was Mexican when she married me. It's not my fault she did not do her due diligence before she entered into this transaction.
You knew what you were doing.
That's right. Buyer beware, Misty. That's right, right? And so that was my thinking at the time. And I realized, of course, looking back, how paradigm centric that really was, and how paradigm projecting it would become, and then how just ridiculous it would sound in the end. Because though it was the paradigm I grew up with, and still exists in my extended family, with people who grew up with paradigms that were similar, like all of my cousins, a lot of my cousins, I can't say all, that's too broad a statement, but with a lot of my family in general, where one person who was of Hispanic ancestry and another one who was of Hispanic ancestry, and were familiar with this paradigm, it carried on without any challenges or anything else with it, right? Not in every case, but in many cases. In mine, there was no hope for it whatsoever. With a non-Latino wife or non-Chinese wife, many Chinese can also have this paradigm, or South Asians, who have this distribution of domestic labor in many cases. So my point with it all is simply this. The collection doesn't work. I had to own it. And I had to decide I wanted to change my paradigm because I wanted to stay married to this incredible woman. Do you want to be a part of an effective governance team?
Yes.
So the decision has to be made, right, by each of you, ongoing. I'm not suggesting it hasn't, but it has to keep being made. I want to be part of an effective governance team. So I am not going to be projecting my paradigm. I'm not going to act like in my paradigm, all the rules we've talked about today or last month don't apply to me, right? I am going to adhere to our rules of conduct that we have documented, etc. And so I'm going to own it when those moments happen where my paradigm gets in the way. And we're going to get to this 4 steps to paradigm removal, right? To wedge removal in this situation. Now, the good news is the earlier you identify a wedge, the quicker and easier it is to remove. I'm not saying it's easy. I'm saying it's quicker and easier, right? But here's where it goes. Number 1, right, drop your paradigm. Number 2, provide closure. Number 3, build structure so we don't have the same wedge over and over. And number 4, let go, right? Be forward looking. So first one, drop your paradigm. So I'm going to continue. I'll leave Georgiana this time. We have a wedge. She's in the city clerk's office. I'm supporting as an analyst the city manager's office. And so we have to interact quite a bit as we work on agendas, we work on a number of things. And I feel like she keeps overstepping her bounds. She's not staying in her lane on a couple things. And maybe I don't in mind sometimes, but the truth is she's way worse than I am in our paradigms. And so we have this thing, right? And it's created little wedges first. I'm like, okay, I'll let it go. And then she's like, okay, I'll let it go, right? And these little wedges kept happening. And one day we woke up 6 months into the relationship, and every time we see each other, right, those hypersensitive radars come out, and we don't give each other the benefit of the doubt. So now that we all speak this language, paradigms, wedges, right, bad conflict, etc., here's how it would work in real life, right? I see Georgiana, I'm like, hey, you know what? I was thinking about this yesterday. I was talking to my wife about this tension that we've had between us lately, and I realized, you know what? We got a wedge. We need to get it out. We all speak the language. We know what happened. Our paradigms collided probably multiple times, drove in little wedges, and now the disconnect, and now we have this tension between us and some dysfunction and some disharmony. We don't have to go into each other. I don't have to do it this way. Hey, I don't know if you've noticed, but we've had this palpable tension, and I don't know if you understand where it's coming from. Hey, I think we got a wedge. Doesn't that shorten the conversation quite a bit? Hey, Tony, I think we have a wedge, right? My fellow risk manager, right? Or my other risk manager. Hey, Stephen, I think we got a wedge, right? Etc. And so what I would say then, she goes, oh, yeah, you know what? I think you're right. I think we both know that's the case. So, oh, great. Do you have some time right now? She's like, actually, I don't. I'm going into a meeting with a couple of department heads, but I'm available this afternoon. Me too. Me too. How about 2 o'clock? Your office? Right? Because I have a cubicle, so it just makes more sense to go to her office and do this, right? So, okay, 2 o'clock. And I show up at her office. And I sit down, and we're ready for step 1. All right. And it's okay to speak openly about it, right? Because we know what the steps are. Hey, Georgina, let's both drop our paradigms so we really hear each other. Right? Let's both drop our paradigms so they don't get in the way of us trying to get this wedge out in an efficient way. It's absolutely okay to do that. Use the hand gestures, right? Like those old masked Jeeps where the windshield went down, right? Hey, let's both drop our paradigms, right? And talk to each other, okay? So she drops hers, I drop mine. Why? Because it allows us to listen to understand. Too many times we listen like lawyers and we listen to respond when really we should be listening to understand one another. Right, when we have that ability. So what more can we say in the context of the time frame we have today? I'll just say this, because there may be some other things I covered in a bit. Stephen Covey's 1989 book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, right? It's always going to be on the bookshelf. It's just that good. And here we are 24 years later, and it's still that good, a quarter of a century later. Habit number 5, seek first to understand, then to be understood. Covey's trying to tell us, don't be so quick to diagnose a solution when you haven't taken, don't be so quick to prescribe a solution when you haven't taken the time to diagnose what the problem is. And you can only diagnose that problem if you listen to understand. Seek first to understand, then to be understood. We all want to be understood. We emphasize that, but are we listening? And the only way to really listen to understand is dropping that paradigm. And then you're like, drop your paradigm. It's like, oh my gosh, there's a whole nother world out here, right? That isn't framed within my value system at all. And so drop your paradigm and listen to understand. And so, all right, Georgina, let's go drop our paradigm so we, maybe get to this more efficiently. No problem, she says. And then I share with her, because I'm the one who initiated the dialogue. I'm like, so it feels like every time we're assigned a project where we need to work together, we make an agreement about who's going to do what, and half the time I turn around and your team's already working on something. And then it feels like we've wasted our time or been spinning our wheels or have all this duplicative work, and it feels very inefficient. And that really feels like, you or your team don't respect our time. So I just go on sharing that. And she dropped her paradigm and she's listening to understand. Because if she left her paradigm up, she'd be processing all my concerns through her paradigm. And she'd be like, okay, that's thought is stupid, so I'm going to dismiss that one. This one's okay. I'll listen to that one. Another dumb one, right? She's filtering. She's filtering. But if you drop your paradigm, you're just genuinely listening to understand. And you all have a totally separate radar. Each one of you has one where you know when someone's listening to you. And you know when someone's not paying attention to you at all, right? Or just in and out. You have that ability. We all do. And so for the most part, good things happen. If all you can master is step 1, good things will happen. Because I'll feel like, hey, you know what? Regardless of what happens, she genuinely listened to me and heard me. Many times you can listen without hearing, but she heard me. That feels great. It makes me feel important and valued, right? And yes, Diane. What's that?
I have to say, good job.
Good job. Give her a wish. All right, so what happens then? When she hears me, she takes some steps. She asks a couple questions to clarify some active listening stuff, and she does that. And then she takes the important step 2. Now, this one's on her. She's either going to provide recognition, acknowledgement, or validation, each being progressively better, in my humble opinion, right? That's me projecting my paradigm a little bit when I say that. But here's recognition. And if this is all the closure that someone can muster, please muster it, right? And she says to me, right? Jerry, based on everything you just shared with me, I can see you're really upset. And I am sorry about that. Those I'm sorry words, right? Those are why pride gets in the way. Ego and stubbornness, right? All get in the way. But she says, Jerry, based on what you just shared with me, I can see why you're really upset. And I'm sorry about that. Already what that does has a disarming effect, right? Where I was maybe up here like this, I hear those words and all of a sudden I'm like softening in the face and the arms go down, right? That's just the reality of when someone gives you closure. That's why when people don't have closure, it is next to impossible to move on. We underestimate the power of closure. And if recognition is all she can do, great. But hey, she's going to try acknowledgement, which is recognition plus. So she said, Jerry, based on what you just shared with me, I can see you're really upset. And I can see that my action or my team's actions have triggered a lot of that emotion. And I'm really sorry about that. She took some ownership of being the trigger. Can Georgiana or any of you make me feel anything? Can you make me feel something? No. You cannot. It is a choice I make, right? Somewhere between data input and data output is a moment for me to choose if I'm going to let the emotions take control of me. You can trigger them. You can trigger them, but I decide if I'm going to embrace them, right? And let the anger take over, right? Going down the 405, right? Or whatever else. We always decide what we're feeling. And so she acknowledged the trigger here. I can see you're really upset, and I can see that me or my team have triggered a lot of this, and I'm really sorry. Oh my gosh, thank you. You're amazing, right? Validation is the best one, because when somebody upsets us or triggers the upset, when somebody, triggers whatever emotion we're going through, and we feel betrayal, we feel stabbed in the back, or whatever that is, the internal debate within ourselves, right? We have this debate. Am I overreacting? Am I making too much of this? Tony surely would have never meant it that way. I'm sure Becky didn't mean to insult me. So I'm sure maybe you did think, I don't know, the laughter on that. And so
Only ever need to observe it.
paradigm projection right there, right? And so what happens? The internal debate rages on, and then I run into my friend, Bobby, around the corner. He said, "What's going on? You seem like you're really lost in thought." Well, this just happened in the meeting. Hey, I was in there. I saw it. I thought the same thing, man. She threw him under the bus. Really? You saw it too? Oh my God, thank you for that. Because it's validating us, right? But she's going to give me that, right? We sit down and talk about everything. And then Georgiana said to me, "You know what, Jerry? I can see that you're really upset based on everything you just shared with me. And I can see that me or my team triggered a lot of this. If I were in your shoes, I'd be feeling the same way, maybe even a little more angry, right? And I'm really sorry about that." It's the part where that empathy played, right? If I were in your shoes, I'd be feeling the same way. Totally validated. She just told me I'm not crazy for thinking and reacting this way. You were an amazing human being, Georgiana. Thank you. You get better by the minute in this room, right? So recognition, acknowledgement, or validation. We need one of them, or we cannot move to the next two steps, which is why pride gets in the way, because we don't want to say the words, "I'm sorry," right? And as I think of my life experience, there are some people, even when they know they're wrong, they have a hard time saying the words, "I'm sorry." Because as we were discussing during our discussion portion, why we don't move wedges, they feel like it's a sign of weakness to admit you're wrong. They feel like are associated with failure, that they did something wrong, right? And so it's hard to say the words, "I'm sorry," without it somehow affecting them or painting them in a way that isn't great. And so this one's hard. And some people want to skip from step 1 to step 3, and it doesn't work. I've seen it attempted many times. It doesn't work. What is step 3? To make that more clear. Step 3 is where we say, "Hey, Stephen, we have this wedge. Let's do something different in the future so we don't keep having the same wedge over and over. Because, Laura, you and I are going to have these wedges now and again, other wedges. Let's not keep having this one, right?" So we build a structure. And so we're doing that here in my example. So after she says those nice things and validates, I said, "Well, I really appreciate that." She jumped right in because either one of us could suggest number 3. And she jumped right in since she was on a roll. And she says, "How about this, Jerry? We will set a plan in the future when we have assignments we're working on together in support of the administrative team. And I will memorialize those assignments in an email after those meetings. And then if either one of us is going to deviate or have our team members deviate from them, we cannot do that without talking to the other one first, her and I, right? Does that work for you? I'm like, yeah, that's a great plan. That will work for us. Here's the plan written down, and we're going to deviate from it, or our team members are. We need consent first, at least verbal consent from the other person. That totally works for me. Yeah, now we have structure. We're not going to have the same wedge again in our exam. So I added to it a little bit, changed it up a little bit. She said, "Oh, that's a great idea. We'll do that also." And then we can get to number 4. That's required of both of us. And that is to let it go. We absolutely have to let it go. Neither one of us has the right to bring it up when it's convenient, right? We have some other totally different misunderstanding 2 months from now, right? And I say to her, "See, this is just like before." Wait, no, because we've worked through it. We made commitments and we've kept them. We fixed this. We removed this wedge. I have no right to bring it up, to trudge it up at my convenience, right? And do that. That's part of it. Be forward looking. Now, step 4 used to be what we call be forgiving. But a lot of people, about 12 years ago, we changed it because a lot of people didn't like the word forgiveness. They thought it was either too religious or too associated with weakness or mistakes, like we said earlier, right? But I want you to think about this definition of forgiveness. Forgiveness is the process of setting someone free. Did I talk about this last month with you? I feel like this rings like my man. I get all my counsels mixed up now, right? Forgiveness is the process of setting someone free, only to discover you were the one who was imprisoned. That's my absolute favorite definition of forgiveness. Can you repeat it? Because I'm thinking of my earlier wedge with Martha. She walked in and I was over here all joyful. Yeah, so that. She walked in, I was like, "Arr." Right? My face turns red. You know, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna go sit down. My mood changed. My blood pressure, I'm sure, went up. Who is this hurting? Me or Martha? Because she comes in just fine, right? Gets herself ready, pulls out a couple of cookies, shares them with everybody but me. And who is this hurting? It's me, not her. Real life story. In 1978, my parents had been separated for 7 years, right? So they separated when I was 4, gonna be 5 or 6, somewhere in there. And in my head, like many kids, many young boys who think of their dads, want a dad, and I had a stepdad in my life by then who was pretty good to me. But my dad was my dad, right? Anybody who's been separated from a parent knows exactly what I'm talking about. And so I always built it up in my head that one day my dad and I were going to encounter each other again, even though we'd lost track of him because we're kids. My mom knew where he was, what he was doing, etc. But she was the one who chose to leave. It was 1970, just to correct myself. And they've been together for 10 years. And there was good reason for her to choose to leave. And it had in my head built up, you know, when I see him, he's going to be so cool. And he's going to be this, he's going to be that, right? Then in 1978, my mom sat us down and she said, "Mijo," and "Mijo," to my brother and I. And informed us that our dad had been the victim of violent crime and had been beaten to death as a result of some drug deal gone bad up in the Santa Cruz Mountains, right? And I thought, oh my gosh. And then you think about it, it doesn't really affect you. Your stepdad's there filling that role. And then you just start to ponder, you know, and at that point I'm 12 or 13 and not much of it's processed that well. But then I started to get angry, you know, all the stages, right, of grief, right, denial, and then anger, and then so forth and so on and so forth, right? And so now I'm at the anger phase. I'm thinking, oh my gosh, right? And I feel like in my DNA, I do have some pretty good forgiving tendencies. I get it from my mother. My brother also has it. And then in 1983, the year I graduated from high school, we were informed that the individual 5 years later who had murdered our biological father was getting out of prison. So I was starting life anew, graduated from high school, whole life ahead of me, and so was this guy, who took away my ideal of what was going to happen. And that was when it was explained to me that you can choose to give this person power and control over you and life situation, or you can stay in control of you and choose happiness and choose moving forward and so forth. And I didn't fully get it as a 12, 13-year-old, right? I couldn't utter the words. Forgiveness is the process of setting someone free, only to discover you were the one who was in prison. But I know this, it didn't take me long to realize that I didn't need to hold on to anything, right? I hadn't had a relationship with my dad since I was 4, almost 5. And, you know, I lost some ideal things, but why would I give this stranger, this convicted murderer, felon, any control over me? And it works. It really works. So we don't want you to waste any of your finite amount of energy on things you have no control over, right? We want you to focus on the things you can control. Looking at my time here. As I'm saying that, what we mean by that is we want you to be an energy efficient human being. Did we talk about this last month? I don't want to cover it again, right? Let's just say, and if it becomes familiar, you just interrupt me halfway. Let's say this bottle represented a full complement of energy, right? That you have on a daily basis. Which of the 5 of you is the most energetic, by the way? You're all pointing to Stephen. So even Stephen has a finite amount of energy, right? All of you have a finite amount. And here we've used some, sometimes we use more. You know, it took way more energy than Tony thought to get here from how far she was coming and so forth. So we have a finite amount. And then, you know, by the middle of the day, and by the way, if you're working with people with whom you have wedges, it takes even more energy because you got to worry about how you write this email. Yeah, I want to send this to Misty, but I don't want to take it the wrong way. So I write it carefully. Then I send it over to my coworker, Bobby. Hey, does this look okay to you? Because I don't want anyone to misread it, right? That's all this energy going on here. Oh my gosh. Instead of just being able to send it without concern, right? You know, and whatever else. And so more energy. Lunch comes, energy comes back a little bit because we had a healthy lunch, right? Breasted chicken. Look at how healthy you look, James. I'm picturing right now. Breasted chicken, salad with dressing on the side, and a fruit cut. Right? That's James right there. As opposed to Jerry. Right?
Actually, he's
He's a
vegan.
vegetarian. So James wasn't eating chicken.
So,
So, like I said, tofu, salad on the side, right? And so,
food that tastes like chicken.
yeah. And then there's my lunch, which is a chorizo burrito. And
Every time you say wedge, I'm thinking wedge salad.
oh, there you go.
You might have to change.
You're gonna be hungry for dinner soon with that wedge salad.
Wedge salad every time you say it.
So at the end of the day, by the time you get back, you know, you got stuff to do at home, whether it's little kids or whatever else, and that's really gone. Then you just got to get horizontal because if you don't get some sleep, one of your vital organs is eventually going to give out, and you're going to have a stroke or something bad's going to happen. The age-old way of, you know, doing harm to somebody, right, in a torture world is depriving them of sleep, right? And so you can't have that. You need to sleep. Very important. And so then you get all your energy back for the next day. But it's still only a finite amount. Why would you waste any of it on things you cannot control, like the past? So, my marvelous Port Hueneme governance team, right? It doesn't feel like we've had the best past we could have had these last couple years or so. Hasn't been horrific. Trust me, I work with a lot of councils. It hasn't been horrific, but it could have been better, more productive, more harmonious, and certainly less wedge-filled than it has been. But we can't change it. We can't change 10 minutes ago, let alone the last 24 months or so, right? Or since last fall that you've been on the council, Martha, right? We can't change any of it. What we can change is tomorrow. We can absolutely change tomorrow. We can focus on being good stewards and adhering to our own policies and directions on how we treat each other. We can focus on the mission or the responsibilities of a governance team, set a vision, establish policy, champion that vision and those policies, and then hire a good city manager and work through them for everything. That we can control. What we cannot control is each other, right? So as you sit here listening to all these things, just say to yourself, am I squarely in the solution part of what Jerry's been talking about today? Or am I part of the problem? And you're probably going to say, sometimes I'm a little bit of one, most of the time, hopefully I'm this one, right? Well, whatever it is, if you do an honest introspective analysis, we need to make sure that we say we are not going to be a paradigm projecting council member at the city of Port Hueneme. We are going to be a governance team member committed to engaging in a professional way, to allowing others to have opinions that are different from those in our paradigm, and not creating an adversarial relationship out of it. And if a wedge does appear, right, it doesn't have to result in what often it can result in, right? If it leads to more censures, right? And a number of other things that can go on. What we can do is say, hey, Bobby, I think we got a wedge, right? After a council meeting. Do you have time to chat now? Well, actually, I got to race to my kids, whatever. Let's set some time. Let me know when you're available this week so we can chat about that. I just want to get it out of the way. I want to get it removed. We can do that. Stephen, you know, I don't know what your schedule is like this week and at the port, but, you know, if you could make some time for me, I think maybe an hour or less, that would be great. Because we can talk about a couple of things that I think did become wedges. Laura, you know, do you have time for me? Whatever it is, we can do that. We have control of that. The great John Wooden, I've quoted him last time, I'll quote him again. Don't let the things you cannot do interfere with the things you can do. You can be an energy efficient human being. One of the characteristics of the happiest people I've encountered in my earthly experience here is people who say, I'm going to use my energy here forward. They don't waste any of it on 5 minutes ago or a year ago. They have fewer regrets, right? When it comes right down to it. We all have things we wish we could change, but it doesn't follow that they have to be regrets to that end. Right, so pivoting a little bit, right, to self-awareness now. And I said we would pivot a little bit, and then I'll get into communication, then we'll be done. Because they're pretty straightforward subjects. But this is the big one, self-awareness. There are 5 buckets of emotional intelligence. Do you remember what they are? Self-awareness. Any others come to mind? Just curious. Even one, empathy.
5 buckets of
Emotional intelligence, self-awareness, empathy, social skills, another one. These are just general buckets, right?
Communication.
Close, right? Internal motivation is a big part of it, and then self-regulation. Self-regulation, self-awareness, empathy, social skills, and internal motivation. The ones that matter the most on an effective governance team are self-regulation and self-awareness. Those are the big ones. Self-regulation is that button right here. We talked about the button, didn't we, last month? See, I feel like I leave you and I've had a lasting impression on you and I've changed your lives forever, right? And then I get these reactions. I'm like, oh, did I cover this last month? I didn't, Georgetown. You don't remember me pointing to my neck and saying there's a button? Good. There's a button right here. Right, not a literal button. That stops you from saying everything that pops into your brain. Right? City managers have to have 3 buttons, right? Just given the nature of their role. They have to have 3 safeguard filters right there. But we all should have a filter that stops us from saying everything that pops into our head. We all know somebody, though, don't we, who has a broken button? Family member, coworker, somebody. And if they think it slips right out. You're like, okay, TMI, too much information. I didn't need to hear that. But others of us, we don't use the self-regulation button when we need to, which is because we didn't take this little test. Here's the test. You ready? Is what I'm about to say going to benefit this interaction with my colleague, Tony? And if it's not, then I'm not going to say it. But you don't get it, Jerry. I'm right. I'm right about this. I have 3 emails that I've hung on to since 2016 for just such an occasion. Right? And I have 1 voicemail dating back to 2013 that I knew would come in handy. I know I'm right. So I need to share this with you because I'm in the right here. Is it going to have a positive impact on this dynamic? If it's not, I don't care how right you are. You swallow it. You swallow it and don't share it. Now, if there's a teaching moment that needs to happen later, great. But now is not that time. Now is not that time. And so we swallow it. That's self-regulation in a nutshell. Self-awareness is a whole nother ballgame because there's 2 parts. There's internal and external self-awareness. Internal is, do you know your strengths and weaknesses? Do you know what drives you? Do you know your values? Do you know, et cetera, right? External is two things. One, you understand the impact that you have on the people around you. That's part of it. And the other part of it, do you understand how people perceive you? That's another part of external self-awareness. Internal, I know my strengths and weaknesses. So if I start down this row right here, Martha, what is something you're good at? Laura, what is something you're good at? Bobby, what is something? And they can all probably tell me, oh, I'm good at time management. Oh, I have good organizational skills. Oh, I can eat a whole hot dog in one bite, right? Whatever it is, right? You're good at, you would share, right? Now, what about what's something you feel like you need to shore up, something you want to improve? You probably know that as well. That's part of internal self-awareness, right? That's important. That's a very important part. What drives you, what's your passion, what's your values, etc. But let's get to external because that's where we interact, right? Do you understand how people perceive you? Do you understand how people see you? Right? Do you get it? What people perceive about you? And is it aligned with what you think you are projecting out to the world? That is so critical to be in a place where you can effectively engage with those people. Because what if people see you as a freaking bore, right? And you go to these parties and you can't quite understand why after 1 minute or two, people are walking away from you like you've got the plague, right? It's because everyone perceives you as a bore. And if you don't know that, that's going to affect how you interact, right, with others. If you do know it, you're going to be able to say, okay, Jerry, at the party, don't talk about yourself. Don't become a me monster. Me, and all the things you're doing. Ask people, hey, Stephen, so what's going on at the port? Anything new and exciting? Hey, Misty, what do you hear about, right? And then you ask of other people. Then you become less of a bore. The bore people are those who always talk about inane subjects that they know, they feel they know better than everybody else and about themselves. But you can't change your behavior, modify your behavior if you don't know that's how you're perceived, right? Maybe you're perceived as a bully. And if you don't know that, that's going to be a problem, right? Maybe you're perceived as a paradigm projecting narcissist. I'm not speaking of anyone in particular. Anyone running for major offices or anything, right? So here's the deal. And by the way, many of our presidential candidates are paradigm projecting narcissists for the record, okay? But some seem to stand out as like experts in it more than others. And so here's the deal. You need to know how others perceive you. And there are ways to figure that out, but you need feedback. You won't know it unless you're open to feedback from caring critics, not feedback from your mom. I was just talking to my mom outside in the few minutes I had. I don't call her enough. I talk to her a couple of times a week, but she'd like to hear from me every day, you know, and I'm okay with that. We compromise when I call her 2 or 3 times a week, depending. And so she's always going to tell me, because she's always said to me, Mijo, you can do anything. I thought I had a career in the NBA ahead of me as a result of her false and misleading statements, right? That's what moms do, good moms in particular. So we want somebody who's a caring critic who knows you and sees you in your professional situations. That's what needs to happen. And then how do you take feedback? Do you listen to understand, or do you listen to respond? Do you listen like a lawyer, or are you listening like you're going to remove a wedge, right? That's the better way to listen, to understand. Because if you're listening to respond, immediately you'd be like, well, the reason you say that I don't connect with my class, I'm thinking of teaching in particular, we give a lot of feedback as I look at the mayor, right? Well, what do you mean I didn't connect well with my class? Didn't you see that? We may have different definitions of connecting with a class, etc. And so you need to be willing to accept the feedback that a caring critic gives and know what a caring critic is. Right? Somebody who has the best interest at heart, somebody who knows you professionally, somebody who's willing to give you honest feedback and is not going to avoid the hard conversations with you. Right? Somebody who's objective with a little subjectivity mixed in there, and that will be helpful in your situation. So, sorry, let me do that again. So when it comes right down to it on this one, do you understand the impact you have on the people around you? I'm going to cover that more when we get to a slide on the communication elements. So I want to switch over on this one. Any questions about self-awareness? There's a whole 2-hour session we do on improving self-awareness. We can't possibly add it to the middle of this session, but it's enough affecting this team that I wanted to put it on your radars. Internal, right? Knowing yourself, your strengths and weaknesses, and then the external. Are you in alignment? Do you understand how people perceive you? And do you understand the impact you're having on the people around you? And it can change with tone. Tone, 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 tone. All the impact. There'll be a slide in a minute covering those 10 adverse impact tones. There are more, but these are the ones that we feel are most important. So, on the subject of communication, my favorite quote: single biggest problem with communication, the illusion that it has taken place. Oh my gosh. It's like this person was peeking into each of our relationships, right? When you think you've communicated and you haven't. So frustrating. You've been with this person long enough to feel like, hey, we should have this down, and we don't. And it happens. It could be you and a sibling, could be you and a child, adult child, could be you and your romantic partner, George Bernard Shaw, so you know what he was talking about, at least on this subject. And I believe it. We think we've communicated. So what is your definition of a successful communication? Now I want you to take a minute and talk to your neighbor again and come up with a quick definition. I'm only gonna give you 1 or 2 minutes. What is a good definition of an effective communication? Right? What does it mean to effectively communicate?
Let me hear you out. What's your definition of successful communication?
Understanding. Yeah, the person's trying to convey you.
I think so. How do you measure for success?
Okay, answer that. I guess being able to be.
Yeah.
It's not just being able to, right? It's like understand. Like, I don't say it. Because I was thinking about that. This whole video is so good. It's big about communication now. Thinking that.
Right.
So. How do you validate myself? How do you?
Say.
I'm not always looking at them there. Like right now, I'm just like,
But I mean, you're still. Cues that you have with.
We're gonna run a drop.
Man, people are gonna put you sideways and then.
Yeah.
It's gonna need you.
Yeah.
When I say no, you guys like don't like.
Yeah.
Okay, who wants to share their definition or kind of, construct it for us?
Figure definition.
Fear not, we will be caring critics and give you good positive feedback, right? But honest feedback. No. Who wants to share their definition of what is, how do we know if we have a successful or effective communication? Give me some pieces. Laura, what were you gonna say?
Yeah, thank you.
What did you guys do?
Martha came up with a good one. No, we were talking and as a definition. I think successful communication is when the intended message has been received by the receiver.
Very good, very good. Any other elements that anybody wants to add to that?
We said that both parties are heard and both parties are validated.
Very nice. Does that cover everybody's definition? Pretty good. Anything missing? Georgiana, anything missing? Or we got it?
The clear messaging and active listening.
Very good. All elements that will be successful to our communication. But that's it. You guys crushed it. You're excellent communicators as far as knowing that. When there's a meeting of the minds and the speaker's desired message is heard and understood by the receiver, effective communication is achieved. So you're all on point with that, right? Absolutely. And what is one way that you ensure that you're getting that message, that you're having a meeting of the minds? Randomly, I picked Georgiana. How do you make sure that you have a meeting of the minds, that you understand?
So if I don't understand something, I would say, okay, this is what I understood. Is that correct? Just to make sure that we're on the same page.
Yeah.
Just do that.
Yeah. So before the person leaves or ends that engagement, hey, so just so I'm clear, you want me to, even if there's this puzzled look on my face, right? And whether I agree is not relevant. It's, let me understand what you're asking me here, Mr. Mayor, right? And so for active listening is tremendous way to ensure we have a meeting of the minds. And you know what it does? It saves us tremendous resources from, heading down a path we were never supposed to go down. Stephen, what's your hand up?
Yeah, when you're doing a similar message with many different people, you have to sometimes, catch yourself, go, okay, wait, this isn't going as well as it did with the prior person, and I'm using the same message, so, you gotta mix it up or try to slow down or
very good.
Figure out how, because you oftentimes you can tell if you're not communicating clearly.
And you quickly learn, right? When you're working with somebody, engaged with somebody, serving with someone in the community, they don't retain as much if it's just an auditory discussion. Some people are visual learners, and you need to put a visual into it somehow. And it could just be grabbing a pad of paper and saying, here's what, It could be creating a PowerPoint. It just depends on what the situation is. But everyone learns differently. Certainly everyone learns differently. So those are all great comments, and I appreciate that. Let's not forget the steps and the elements here of effective communication. This sounds so communication 101, like you're just becoming adults and I'm sharing this with you. But I'm here to tell you, technology has really it's been like an undertow pulling us away from effective communication. Here's what I mean. Step 1, a message is sent. Step 2, a message is received. Step 3, a message is understood. Now, step 4, this one isn't as critical in elements. This is the sharing elements. Why? Because I sent my colleague Misty an email in the morning and had a 5 o'clock deadline tomorrow. And near the end of the day today, I haven't heard from her, haven't had an acknowledgement or anything. So I go to get my cup of coffee and I walk circuitously. Here's the coffee machine, but I walk all the way around to make sure I go past Misty's cubicle, right, to the fellow analyst. And I say, hey, Misty, how you feeling? Good, how's the family? Yeah, did you guys get that vote out this weekend? I really don't care about any of that. I kind of do, but I kind of don't. And then I say, hey, did you get that email I sent you this morning? Because I didn't get an acknowledgement. So it caused me a level of stress, uncertainty, a little worry, not a ton. And I had to go fix this. I didn't want to go home thinking about it in the evening, right? And so that's why I like acknowledgement. A lot of your paradigms agree with me, don't they, on acknowledgements? Some of yours more than others. Do you have to, give a big acknowledging response? No, she could easily just say, and she learns this about me, got it, period. THX, period. Not even a full thing, right? I'm fine with that. I'm fine with that. As long as there's an emoji, yes, that will work. That will work. And so there is message sent, message received, and message acknowledged, understood and acknowledged. Let's answer this question on here. City manager asked me to ensure that we have the community center set up for a 3 o'clock special council meeting on July the 25th, 2023. Right, and I'm the public works director, right? He said it to me because I have a team that fulfills his assignments. And so I immediately that same day sent an email, right, end of June, to my people who would do this. And then I sent him a reminder email because I'm very responsible last week. And then this morning I said, remember that meeting is at 3 o'clock. Please make sure that room is set up well in advance of that. Have I communicated? No. I got both reactions there. I started, JB. I haven't heard back, haven't heard anything, right? So what have I done? I've done step 1. That's where technology is getting us in trouble. I texted Tony. I mean, come on. What more do you need than that? I emailed 3 times, right? So when it's not set up and I show up, I get a phone call on my cell phone. I don't know why they're not there, James. I've emailed them on numerous occasions, including this morning. So basically what I'm implying is, so I can wash my hands of this whole thing. I did my job, right?
I sent it.
Yeah, that's right. That is the problem with communication, not to mention, right? Was it received? There's no acknowledgement. And what was received, was it understood? Did they just set up chairs or were they going to put up tables? Were we clear about all this? Right? And so forth. So that's why technology has been a challenge for us.
I think technology does also the opposite of it. It makes people used to quick response and quick at your fingertips acknowledgements. And so we get used to that. now, everything now, nobody knows how to wait for proper.
Is this speaking hypothetically?
Yeah. I don't speak.
That is a huge problem. That I mean, there's no one more addicted to this. A handheld device. For those who are not watching or seeing, I'm holding up my smartphone. First came out in 2007, and since they've come out, I have a firm, open, and acknowledged addiction. I can tell you my emotion is very strong that I love this thing, right? And its subsequent children that will come along later, right? I love it. It allows me to never have to use my out of office thing because I don't want boundaries from my clients. I want to have this unhealthy relationship where they can call me anytime and I'm going to respond. Right? Best one being stand in front of the David in Florence and a client called and I took it. That's a lack of boundaries, right? I have since fixed that. And I put it on silence and I call them later that night with the time change. So that is a problem. People have us on a leash, they think, an electronic leash. And if they yank on it, we should turn and say, hey, what do you want? Which direction am I supposed to go, right? That is tough.
I always tell people, I remember when I was growing up as a kid and how much simpler things were. We didn't care about the time. We just ran around and played and had fun and nobody cared about what time it was. Now it's like everybody cares about what time it is. Everybody wants to know what's happening now. It was a much simpler time then.
You are taking me way back right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think though, Misty was saying the problem with that too, though, is then step 3 just gets overlooked. The
Yeah.
acknowledgement comes too fast, and then when you see the acknowledgement, then have this happen where I'm like, but you didn't answer my question.
Right.
You acknowledged me, but now I gotta go back to you and say, oh, so I think 3 is a big problem with the quickness of always willing to respond.
We are resonating with one another right now, aren't we? This is all something we're all experiencing. And so what can we do to ensure that we are communicating as a governance team, right? And doing that. Responsiveness is a big one, right? Are you accessible to one another, right? Can you reach one another when you need to reach one another? What's a reasonable expectation for the Port Hueneme City Council governance team as far as responsiveness goes to one another? You may not have the best relationship with one another, every one of you, but nonetheless, we should maintain an expected level of responsiveness to one another. Well, what is that? There's no set rule here. Let's just acknowledge this right now, just to quickly discuss that. What is a reasonable amount of time if I send my fellow council member, Martha, a text or an email? What should I expect as a return message or acknowledgement?
What time did you send it?
What's
What time
that?
did you send it?
I sent it at 8 o'clock this morning.
By the end of the day?
I would say
Wow.
24 hours, but honestly, I don't think anybody in here has ever taken more than 24 hours to get back to me.
You all feel that way? Do you all feel like your fellow council members are responsive? Stephen?
Yeah.
Misty?
Yeah, I don't have it.
Yeah.
That's not something we have an issue with, I don't think.
Yeah, I don't.
Laura, do you feel like people are responsive to you?
Yeah, I think so.
Martha? Martha said no. You didn't see her. She's throwing a wrench into the system. That's marvelous. So that is a reasonable expectation. I think same day, Laura, I might struggle with that, but within 24 hours, right? Would be okay. 24 hours, I think.
Yeah, I guess it depends too on a message, but I think that we have a responsibility as city council members to check our email every day. So
I'm okay with that, yeah.
And I tell everybody, contact me via phone, text, call. That's usually the if you want to get to me, like that's the fastest way.
You'll check your email, but if you want to get to me immediately, text me, social media or something, Instagram or message me somehow, right?
Oh,
That
we're
pops
doing
up and gives me an alert.
When some of us work and some of us, we don't have our phones in front of us, I would expect that Bobby doesn't have his phone near him when he's teaching. So I think we understand who's working and who's, instantly available versus who is not. To have a little bit more flexibility.
That's good. As long as you have context for everybody, that's a good thing. Right, that works. How much of our communication is nonverbal? In emotional situations, let me rephrase that. Not just like today, right? We're in this calm, cool, collected environment, and you all seem breezy to me at the moment, although you may not be, right?
I would say 90%.
90%,
30?
30%, we're all over here, that's good.
85%, 80.
In emotional situations, what's emotion? Frustration, stress, anxiety, anger, right? Disappointments. You name it. You name the emotion, okay? And it's emotion that was triggered in you and you chose right after that. It was triggered, you don't have to choose. It's up to you. But in an emotional situation, 93% of our effective communication is nonverbal. That number has been challenged for 56 years. It's slightly younger than me. I was born in 65 and we've had this number since 1967. Dr. Albert Moravian and a team of researchers at UCLA gave us that number. And it ended up turning into a book, etc. But they've been challenging it for the last 5-6 decades. And we hover around 90%, even in, I don't know, pop culture. You look at the beginning of that movie Hitch, and the narration starts with scenes of New York and Will Smith's voice, the hitcher, right? And he says, you know, within the first 2 minutes of meeting somebody, you'll know whether or not they're into you, right? He talks about 90% of our body language, 90% of our communication is nonverbal. So it's a number that's used out in the world. This is the actual number. And what is nonverbal communication? There's a lot of it. There's a lot of it right there, right? When it comes down to it. The way you're still moving, Misty. Look at the way Misty's sitting right now. Hands on her chin, right? Or chin on her hands, and leaning forward a little bit. That suggests very attentive at the moment. Same with Laura, the way she's sitting right there, right? And all that. So you guys have all given me good body language. Earlier when I asked the question, have we experienced wedges? Clearly the city manager was distracted with an urgent phone call and his body language showed it, you know, et cetera, right? Things like that go on. So here they are. Now, all this we're talking about here, by the way, do you know if you're an eye roller? Some of you are not aware that you are an eye roller. You don't even know, but I said something a moment ago, one of you, right? Some of you don't know. Some of you do know, but it doesn't mean what you think it means, Jerry. Really, what does your eye roll mean, right? Because most of the time an eye roll is dismissive or, you know, disregarding. It's not always disrespectful, but it can be dismissive and disregarding. It was invented by teenagers, actually. Right? The eye roll. I roll my eyes better this way. Right with the eyes. So if you're an eye roller because a caring critic has shared with you and some feedback there that there is an eye roll situation going on with you, then understand, right? And sometimes you may not change it if you've been doing it your whole life. But alert people, hey, sometimes I roll my eyes, but it's just because of, you know, right? Sometimes
I'm taking my
sometimes somebody makes a statement like this. Hey, you know, those Kardashians, everything they touch turns to gold by their definition of gold, right? Everything they touch turns to gold. Oh, the Kardashians, somebody rolls their eyes. That's one way. But if somebody says, hey, city manager proposes our new proposed budget, preliminary budget, and the new budget year next April, we'll say, maybe March. And he asks everybody to cut their budget by 5%. And all these directors in the room and a couple of managers look at each other non-verbally and look at me go, right? What do you take from that? That's a clear message. It's okay to acknowledge it. It's communication. Yeah, notice a couple of you rolling your eyes. You know, what's your knee-jerk reaction to this right now? You know, well, we've already cut a lot. It's okay to acknowledge it. It's part of our communication. And so there it is, whatever those things are. But look, this is only 55% of the 93. What's the other 38%? I said I'd come to it later. You remember? Tone for the exclamation point. Here they are, the ones I promised you I would give you that have an impact where you may not understand in self-awareness the impact you're having on people around you. Here are what we call the adverse impact tones. Condescending and its cousin, patronizing. Those are kissing cousins right there, both having an adverse impact. Angry and sarcastic tones, right? Now this one, take with a grain of salt, please. If you're sarcastic once in a while, right? As I'm talking to council member Gallman, he says to me something, a sarcastic response to something I shared, you know, and he's good at sarcasm, he's gonna get a belly laugh out of me because I like well-placed sarcasm. It's gonna make me laugh out loud, truly. But if 9 out of my 10 interactions with him are met with sarcasm, that's going to work my last nerve. And it would just about anybody. If you're working with somebody on a regular basis and 9 out of the 10 responses you get from the city manager are sarcastic, okay, can we just get a straight answer, please? Do we need the sarcasm? Right? It's going to work your last nerve. You may not even recognize it or feel it until we're saying it right now for the first time or hearing it for the first time, but it does. So well-placed, limited sarcasm, okay. But as a regular way of dealing with judgmental tones, this one causes problems. Picture somebody walking in, right, to a place. Hey, good morning, everybody, walking past the cubicle. Your back is to them. They can see your monitor and they pause unsolicited and they walk up behind you and go with the whole sour face, right? Why are you doing it that way? That's always fun. That's always fun. There's a word missing, but it's implied, right? Why are you doing it that way, moron? Right? It's all judgmental right there. The one that happens in the corporate yard a lot, the accusatory tone. There, accusatory tone. Someone else said, who moved my sprayer off my truck? Now, is that going to elicit some marvelous responses to that one? You know, look, you know, we all know we can borrow each other's things, but this person saying you're going to borrow it, fine, put it back, all in an accusatory thing. Who moved my sprayer? Who used it? Had a nickel for every time we heard that accusatory tone and the negative impact it has, as opposed to, hey, I'm getting ready to head out. I'm working on that median out on Maple and my sprayer's gone. Who was the last one to borrow it so I can get it back? Is that different? Yeah. Yeah. Who moved my sprayer? I got to go spray today and you're slowing me down. Who moved it? It's not good. These tones make all the difference in the world and what we do. There are some others, but these are the big ones. These are the big ones that have an adverse impact. And you know people who use them. My last thought on that one is, it took me the better part of, I don't know, many years to overcome my accusatory tone. Why? Because I'm the byproduct of some primary caregivers, not my sweet mother. My dad, my stepdad, who was part of my life, raised me, etc. He always had an accusatory tone. I don't know if it's something from Jalisco or what it is, right? But he always had an accusatory tone every time. And so I was a summer day, I'm home. My dad had a flexible schedule. He was self-employed, doing property maintenance and landscaping and gardening. That's what he did. And successful guy who just had a flexible schedule. He left some guys at a project here, guys at a project there. He could pop in anytime, which always kept us on our toes in the summer, my brother and I. Mom had a very fixed schedule. One day I had baked a cake from scratch. It was so good. I used 2 bags of powdered sugar for the frosting, right? It was amazing. Yeah, it was good. And why did I do that? Because my mom was so shy. She worked so hard, and she once in a while wanted to do something extracurricular. She wanted to go to a ceramics class. She wanted to go to a cake decorating class, etc. She had no daughters, right? We had all these stepbrothers that would come up from Mexico. You know, every summer a new one would come up, and we, you know, integrate them in things. But no women. It was very testosterone laden. So I had to become her buddy. Right now, I went to cake decorating class. I went to ceramics class, and so I was making this cake from scratch. And so. Made it. I thought I better clean up this kitchen. You can imagine a mess. 13-year-old, 14-year-old cleaning, you know, making a cake. I thought I'll do it later. Big mistake. I go lay down in my room for a minute, about to put on my headset, listen to a little Led Zeppelin, which was popular at the time. And sure enough, the front door opens because my door rattles every time the front door opens. My bedroom door. I'm like, no. I walk in. My dad walks in. I hear this, "Hello," which is Spanish for Jerry. Short for head. I go, "Hello." I walk into the kitchen. Just go take your medicine, Jerry. Right? Go take it. You had a chance to clean it. You chose not to. I walk in, light into this arched doorway of the kitchen, lean against the wall like this. And I'm like, "Yes, what is it?" He's got his back to me and he's facing the cake. Right? He turns around. He's got this streak of chocolate frosting on his lip. And he goes, "Did you make this cake?" And of course, the 14-year-old rebel in me is like, "Well, there's no one else here, idiot, just me," right? But I didn't dare say that to my dad in a million years, right? He's still alive, and I hope he doesn't watch this recording, right? But that's what I thought in the moment. And after he said, "Did you make this cake?" I'm like, "Yeah, I made the cake." He says, It's good. Who would have thought with that furrowed brow and that tone, that accusatory tone, that a compliment was coming my way? It almost takes away the joy. Hey, don't compliment me anymore, all right? It's too scary and painful, all right? So I spent my adult first few years, while I was still a trial lawyer, overcoming that tone when I realized, thanks to a caring critic known as my wife, that I had a bad tone. And I had a bad day at work, super bad day. Things did not go my way in the courtroom. And so I walk into the house thinking, my oasis. Now, mind you, at this point, we have 4 kids under the age of 8. Okay, 5th one hadn't come along. And thinking there's going to be an oasis waiting for me to just, lift my spirits. And I open the door, and in this tile entry, toys go flying, right, as I do it. I'm like, who left these toys here? Because we talked about it as a family. Let's not leave toys in dangerous places where they can clutter up the house. Da, da, da. Who left these toys here? And what had been joyous laughter and sounds the moment before I used that accusatory tone disappeared. And it was like crickets. My wife pokes her head around the corner. She sees me, gives me a look I never, ever like to get, right? And then she looks at the kids, hey, kids, pick up those toys, and then head upstairs and get ready for dinner. And then I knew I was in trouble because she never sent the kids away unless something bad is going to happen, right? And so she looked at me and said, hey, you know what, Jerry? I think you save all of your good tones for your clients and your colleagues. And we get all the crappy tones at the end of your day. And that's not fair. It cut me to the core. And of course, I had a terrible reaction. That's not true. But within a short amount of time, probably within a year, from that moment, I kept growing and growing and doing some introspective analysis and realized how right it was. All these people that mean more to me than any clients or any other humans walking planet Earth, right? And I'm the source of the unhappiness when I come home. That's not right. It's not okay. And not a relationship I want to foster or have when they get bigger, when they become adults themselves. And so I had to make the decision to alter my accusatory tone. That was my biggest problem. Judgmental was a little bit, but accusatory was a big problem. And I'm happy to report all these years later that it is not part of my regular tone usage. I don't use accusatory tones. I don't. And it was a deliberate decision followed by lots of trial and error, followed by recommitments. And we can all do it. If I can do that, anybody can. If I can alter my paradigm to shift my division of domestic labor paradigm to one where I do my fair share, as I shared earlier, if I can alter the usage of my tone by deliberate decisions and recommitments, anybody can do it. There's zero special about me. I just use the experiment of my life to illustrate the point that these things can be done. And they all start with a decision, right? And so I ask you, on your external self-awareness, do you understand how people perceive you? Do you? And then how much of that perception is being generated by these tones, right? Or your inability to be flexible with your paradigm and allow others to be different from you and it still be okay? That's the question. And so I offer to you this free offer. If you can't find a caring critic, I'm happy to be one for you. I'm happy to be one for you. And I mean that. I'm happy to be one for you to help you understand that the best version of you is out there. It may reflect the person you are now, or it could be one that will be reflected in the future based on your ability to understand how people are perceiving you. And then whether that aligns with you as the best governance team member you can be. All right, I'm going to press forward on a couple of things to say. Don't use nonverbal communication or other forms like texting and email or other such things to try and remove wedges. Okay, just a little reminder. You don't remove wedges by email. You only compound wedges by email or texting or other things because you lose all the nonverbal that is so critical, so critical. So even though you want to do it some other way, the only alternative I'll give you is a video conference. You can use that, right? But don't try and do it any other way. Zoom, Meets, Teams, those are all work, right? It is an in-person endeavor, but you can do it via Zoom or other video conferences. Couple of other points in case you're struggling with this, and we're at the end of my time. I know we're scheduled till 6, but I really am done here, and I feel like it's a good time for us to stop. If you struggle to listen to understand, B. Georgiana, try paraphrasing, summarize, or reflect back to the speaker what you think you're hearing, right? And I would guess, just knowing what I know about you, that you all do this. You all do this at some level, and just keep doing it, right? If you struggle with tone, try warming up before the conversations, right? And focus on inflection. If you struggle with tone, this works. This helped me so much doing this right here, especially if I had to have a conversation that I knew the other person was going to disagree with me on, or it's like a performance evaluation, right? Something like that. Work on your tone. You want to be even keeled as a leader. You don't want to get sucked into the emotion of somebody being angry or upset with you. If you struggle with nonverbal messaging, practice. Avoid closed off gestures like cross legs, folded arms, engage in eye contact, mirroring, and nodding, right? A lot of that can help. So these are all helpful tips, right, that you can look at on the slides when you get them. Half the world composed of people who have something to say and can't, and the other half who have nothing to say and keep on saying it. Which one are you, right? At different times in my life, I've been both of these people. I've been both of these people. And I will say this, that in the end, when it comes right down to it, I said this to you before, but I'm going to repeat it. The only limitation that the 5 of you have to being the best darn city council in the history of the city of Port Hueneme are the limitations you place before yourself. If we're energy efficient human beings and decide, you know what, I'm not going to let my pride get in the way. I'm not going to be stubborn or egomaniacal. I want to do what's best for the city of Port Hueneme. And so if there are things, I will change them. All we can change is here forward. We cannot change even 10 minutes ago. So let's be those people. Let's be the best version of us as a governance team we can be. And I promise you, by the end of it, we'll all be building statues of each one of you, right? To erect in key places along the beach. Maybe the beach for you because you're the beach cleanup guy, right? But for the rest of you, other critical places. Truly, all joking aside, each of you possesses the talent to be a superb, not good, a superb council member and member of this governance team. Let's focus on the things that matter and that we have control over and let go of those things we cannot. Keep working through James when it comes to any aspect of city operation, right? Stay in your lane on that one. That is really critical to avoid losing any immunities that you have in the government code and to ensure that we are uniform and consistent in sending a message to each other that you believe the rules apply to you just like everybody else. You're not special, right? All right, anything that we need to add to our discussion today or before we press forward, starting with our mayor, anything that we need to add or take away? All right, because if I did say something you weren't happy with, Madam Vice Mayor, you good? Madam Council Member Hernandez, you're good?
Yeah, thank you.
Martha, yes? Council Member, your name's along with me, with John, right? Council Member Gama, we good?
All over it.
Excellent, excellent. Thanks, everybody. Have a great rest of your night. Thank you for your continued service to this community. It's going to pay huge dividends. It really is. All right, we'll see you next time. All right. We do need to decide. Thank you, James, for the token applause. Those never get old, really. We do need to talk offline about a date for our next session, and I'll send you what the topic is.
Okay.
And it won't actually be me. It will be my colleague, Jacob Houghton. He's much younger, much better looking, and a better presenter. So you can't go wrong. You can't go wrong. So thanks, and I'll be in touch on it. Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks,
you.
Tony, for your support of the pool, for being here all this distance.
All right,
And Becky, thank you for representing the entire community of Port Wayne.
Thank you, Mr. Preciado.
Good job.
Yeah, the next regular meeting is scheduled for Tuesday, September 5th. Mark it on your calendars at 6:30 p.m. I'd like to adjourn the meeting. The time is now 5:28 p.m.
Thank you.